Hi, I think we're live. Hi there. I'm Eugene Sepulveda. Welcome to Culturati Live. I am the CEO of the Entrepreneurs Foundation and a co-founder of Culturati. The Entrepreneurs Foundation, well, first let me say thank you to my friend Tim Donohue and to CBRE for being the sponsors of our second Culturati Live. Just quick commercial about Entrepreneurs Foundation and Culturati. Entrepreneurs Foundation was founded in 1999 by entrepreneurs and venture capitalists intending to leverage the financial and intellectual capital of the entrepreneurial community to have impact on Austin and on the greater Austin area. And today we're, as you can see, the philanthropy in Austin is mostly led by tech entrepreneurs. That wasn't the case in 1999. Culturati was co-founded by me and Josh, and with extraordinary assistance from our dear friend, the producer, Autumn Rich. We came together and created a community of CEOs and other execs who understood the transformative power of culture in the workplace, with our employees, and in the community. So we share our playbooks, and we invite people in for conversations. And Culturati Live is a natural extension of that, especially now when we're kind of living in virtual worlds and virtual companies. I want to start with a poll, and you should be able to take the poll by going to the tools. How many of you are back in the workplace or expect to be back in the workplace in the next 60 days? If you'll take a moment to answer that, that would be really helpful for the speakers and for us. I mentioned before, much appreciation to CBRE for sponsoring today's topic, and to Tim for bringing it forward, the importance of the questions and the processes that we need to go through to prepare to be back into the game. Our moderator, Tim's going to serve as our moderator today. Tim is a senior real estate executive in Austin for CBRE. He specializes in helping his clients find cross-border solutions. But he thinks a lot about the challenges that his clients are going to have in their real properties. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim to introduce the rest of the panelists. And again, thank you for being with us. Tim, all yours.
Eugene, thanks so much, and thank you for the opportunity to partner with you and Culturati Live. And we're excited about this dynamic conversation with some really star-studded panelists. And I think it's really timely in terms of our nation's history, as we're dealing with something both biological and now pretty social, about getting back to the workplace and how is that defined, and what it looks like from both a productivity standpoint, but also a positivity standpoint. So we're really excited to be a part of that. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our three really impressive panelists today. First of all, we have Eric Starkloff, the recent, as of February 1st, recent President and CEO of National Instruments. He's going to be able to speak about the organization, a large organization here in Austin, and how they're dealing with several of the events that are taking place right now, and how they're evolving their thinking in terms of bringing people back to the office, and also making sure that it's a great environment for people to continue to be culturally sound and productive. Then we also have Elaine Garza, 14-year principal and founder of Giant Noise. Her client list includes some of the largest companies in and around the Austin metro area, as well as around the country. And she's going to talk about a lot of how the impact of messaging to employees and employers will have kind of a trickle down and ripple effect on all those people and all the different parts of the food chain associated with how we create a great articulation behind trying to get back and go back into the workplace. Finally, we have Jesse Sellers from CBRE, a senior solutions leader in space enablement. What does that mean? Well, Jesse will certainly go further into that explanation, but certainly creating environments that, again, as I said earlier, kind of create best possible solutions for both productivity and positivity for both employees, employers, and guests alike. With that being said, I just kind of want to dive into kind of some of these questions will be geared towards all guests, and then a couple may be geared towards certain individuals based on certain subject matter expertise. So I think, as Eugene kind of stated, for your particular organizations, who's coming back in the next 60 days? How are they coming back? And is there a specific reason as to why they're coming back versus a work from home mentality? Eric, why don't you start, and then we'll kind of go clockwise and counterclockwise. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we've actually had a set of employees. First of all, we're global, so we've had to deal with this kind of globally. I was talking to Tim as I came on. I actually took on the CEO role of NI back on February 1st. I've been at the company a very long time, but that's when I actually took on this role formally. And it was February 2nd, a Sunday, that we decided that we would not bring our employees back from the Chinese New Year into our Shanghai office. So that was the first place affected. And so we've seen this kind of rolling effect on our workplaces around the world. And over that time period, we've had to deal also with sort of a set of employees that are critical to keep our operations running. So we actually run factories, and we had to very early on put sort of procedures in place and safety procedures in place for those employees. And we've also had a small number of employees, even in Austin, supporting our critical customers. I mean, we have customers that do things like build ventilators. And so, that's obviously ramped up a lot in this period. And we've had to keep a certain amount of support staff, small number, 5% or less of our people, supporting those customers. So we've had to deal with that all along. Most of our employees have been working from home. And like most people have probably experienced, we've been able to do that better than I ever imagined. And we continue to do that. And then we've started the process of sort of slowly staging people back into our offices around the world, including in Austin. Still have a pretty limited number of people, and we'll take another step on Monday to take a few more people. Actually, KXAN did a piece on us this morning showing kind of videoing our campus and showing the differences in how we've reconfigured things with a whole set of safety protocols and everything. And we'll probably talk more about that in order to keep people safe as a limited number of people start coming back into the office.
Great, thank you. Elaine?
I would say for us it was interesting. In March 13th, we all took off, and then pretty much the same. Have been working from home. We have offices in San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, and Arizona. And it was interesting because I think there's a group of people that love working from home and love being home, but some of the younger staffers, they wanted to be able to come to the office, and so we did put some procedures in place, one at a time. So I'm at my office, right, two at a time. That could come in, be at opposite ends, have all the, stations, masks, all the things, because I think they felt that it was important to get out of their houses and to be able to come in. Our office is much smaller. It's not like Eric. I mean, it's 15, 20 people. And so in San Antonio, which again, I think, city to city, you're also seeing people's comfort levels are different in different cities. And so we kind of adapt to that. And we also have staffers that have to drop things off or go to, no meetings necessarily, but are needing to kind of get out of the office here and there. And so we are trying to really push all those safety, the protocols. In some ways, we have to really remind them over and over again, because I think, again, everyone's comfort levels are very different. And we rep a lot of restaurants that are open, that have, like people coming and things like that. So we're taking everything, kind of very slowly. No one has to come back at all. It's really up to them if they want to. I think we've adopted, work from home as long as anybody wants to. We also, it was interesting to have people that went to their parents or went to different places and have not returned to work from different locations. So we're kind of navigating that right now as everything opens up. But it's definitely interesting. But we don't want a full office. We're trying to make sure that it's very controlled, and we don't usually have more than 4 or 5 here at a time.
Great. Jesse?
Yeah, sure. So a couple different perspectives. So just as a recap, space enablement can be a bit confusing in terms of what that actually entails. So space enablement at CBRE essentially includes all of the disciplines that participate in the development and implementation of new workplace strategies for our clients. So it includes our workplace strategy consulting team, our designers, our engineers, cost consultants, move managers, furniture advisors, so on and so forth. All of those folks who are kind of participate on the strategy and then the implementation of those strategies. So, being a real estate organization, we have been planning for ourselves, for the 100,000 individuals who work at CBRE, in addition to developing products and services to help other organizations answer those most immediate questions that we're talking about now and that we'll kind of continue to elaborate on. So in terms of CBRE globally, we have some global offices open. We have subscribed to the notion that we are going to try to buy as much time as possible and kind of hedge against that near-term uncertainty and volatility. And we're in no rush to be the first back in terms of our kind of knowledge workers in the office environment. We have essential workers from a move management, project management, and property management standpoint who have continued to be in the fields. None of our U.S. offices have quite opened yet. We've had some that were planned, but have actually been delayed because some of those metrics in the states that they're in have not quite hit the mark in terms of legally being allowed to go back. But we'll close with just kind of the broader conversation of how organizations that we're talking to and advising on reentry are thinking about their overall timing. And it really centers around kind of first and foremost, in terms of kind of the decision tree or just the logic is, are we allowed to? So depending on our kind of state and local government orders, are we allowed to do this? Secondly, are we ready to do it? And I think we'll get deeper into how we measure that and how we really define the why of getting back into the office. But that's kind of, has to do with our functional dependencies on the office, but also our risk tolerance as an organization. And then lastly, a little bit more obscure, but depending on when you started planning for the reentry, you've realized you need certain types of things along the lines of kind of PPE, hand sanitizer, potentially, low cost furniture remedies in terms of plexiglass barriers and whatnot, signage. Some of these things have longer lead times than others. And some of the more critical pieces are anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks. In terms of what we're seeing. So that at times is actually having an impact on when people decide to re-enter as well.
Great, and thank you, everyone. That was pretty comprehensive. Elaine, you brought up an interesting point about people currently working from home, and no one is ever going to be forced to come back to the office should they decide not to. I think I'd like to ask Elaine and Eric as kind of principals at your firm, and then Jesse, from what you've heard from a general trend, at what point does productivity suffer enough from a work at home? And I think there's been several examples. I'm so happy there hasn't been any crying babies in the background or people in bathrobes in the background or anything like that. And then second, from a cultural and cohesion standpoint, how, seeing the whites of everyone's eyes in the conference rooms and accountability. And so kind of a productivity versus accountability as measured against people's personal feelings of safety. And how are you dealing that as corporate leaders?
Can you guys hear me now? Do I sound better?
Yeah, you sound great, Elaine. Go ahead.
Okay,
You can
good.
start.
Sorry about that. I think my audio on the computer. For us, I mean, it's kind of dorky, and I know a lot of people are doing similar things, but Zoom happy hours, and we do a Monday. Every Monday, we always had a 10 o'clock meeting. Now it's just on Zoom, and we also do a happy hour at the end of the week that we have different staffers make cocktails, or their favorite drink, and I think that makes a huge difference. And I also, people are going on walks, socially distanced. I think you do need that interaction, and I think you do want to see your coworkers. I know I miss it terribly, and I think that, and I don't know forever we'll always work from home, but I think like Eric too, we've learned that you can do a lot and you can get a lot done. I mean,
do you have a percent? Do you have like doing a lot? Can you apply like a metric to that? If you're usually 100 miles per hour in the office, are you going 80? Are you going 85?
I mean, I think we're probably even more. I mean, our problem is actually working too much, because I think that we've had to really talk about, when do you begin and end? And if you have a client that's calling at 8 in the morning and then another one that's calling at 8 at night, they know you're not out. They know you're not in, you could be on a call, but it's like, how do you create, those, for me, it's always the drive home was when I really cleared my head and, kind of was like transitioned to home. And when you don't have that, what do? You walk out of your, or
Sure.
whatever it is. And so I think that's what I've tried as a leader, and tried to work with my team to say, you can still have those barriers and boundaries. You have to explain to the clients that weekends are your weekends. And, there's even the argument, like, our vacation days, do you still take and I'm trying to push, like, everyone needs a break. You have to be able to kind of unplug a little bit. And so I think that's been a transition in that way, that's a little bit different for us.
Sure.
Yeah, I can jump in and build
Please.
on that, Tim. First of all, the question is like really complex and nuanced, and it's one we talk about sort of all the time. And I'll just say, from our organization, we actually have just a huge range and diversity of different roles. And if I take the productivity question you had, we actually range from 0% productivity working from home. So we have some roles that just simply cannot be done. A factory worker is an example. To, as Elaine said, we have people that are actually measurably more productive working from home. So we can do things. We have a large number, over 1,000 people developing code, for example, software engineers. You measure how much code they develop and submit, and they're actually more productive, and they work longer hours, to Elaine's point, and they have to more manage that they're restraining themselves and setting boundaries and all. And then we have people in between. We have a lot of people that do sort of technical work that relies on labs and relies on certain types of collaboration, and we estimate their productivity 75 to 80% of a normal level. So there's quite a range, and so therefore our policies have to be pretty flexible. Right now, we've said, hey, anyone that feels uncomfortable coming back in, certainly through the end of this year, doesn't have to. Even in some of those roles that are significantly impacted from a productivity point of view. I think as this goes, it's going to be very dynamic. That's been kind of the word of the year for us, is just being adaptable and dynamic, because this thing has just changed as we've gone, and we've had to invent a lot of this as we go. Last thing I'll say is just, we're thinking about this issue on time horizons. There's kind of, what are the things we're doing immediately? What are the things we're doing for this year? And then how are we learning from this process to reimagine what work looks like in the years to come? Because I do think, as Elaine pointed out, there's things we've learned that actually work better. There's things we've learned that are constraints. Some things work really well for a month. Yeah, well, I mentioned like some of the code developers, as an example of a role that's actually more productive. There's elements of my own job that, let me just use the example of a meeting like this. We're a global organization. We suffer from the challenge of, the location effect, right? So we have lots of people that we'll have a meeting in Austin, and maybe a couple people joining from Europe. They get a subpar experience. They can't get into the meeting, all that stuff. Now you level the playing field, and we find for certain types of meetings, it's better. And there's certain types of things we want to do over these kind of, Zoom or Teams or these kind of formats more. There's other kind of things that maybe the social interaction and the nuances of body language that you get from being face-to-face don't translate quite as well. We're trying to figure out, are we the innovative sort of longer term thinking? Are we able to do that as well? We're experimenting with a lot of things, and the jury's still out on that. And that's part of what we're going to keep learning this year. And then as we reimagine work, and it'll be interesting to get Jesse's point of view, we can talk, we're reimagining our workspaces for the future too. And I think they're going to be pretty dramatically different from how they've been in the past, because they'll serve a different purpose.
Well, that seems like a natural transition to Jesse. Jesse, what are your thoughts about, without holding your feet to the fire, what is the future of a typical 25,000 square foot office space look like for, John Q. typical office tenant? Does it look dramatically different than it does now? How do people interact? Is there going to be certain training that's involved with, not only the job itself, but how you interact in the environment? And please feel free to take the reins.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question now. I want to Eric, something you said, I think, articulated a really good point that everybody should be aware of. And you said, this is something we talk about all the time. I think alluding to just this idea of balance and how we kind of use the tools that we have at our disposal in terms of flexible work or tools and technology and different protocols and guidelines to find that right balance that drives satisfaction within our people and productivity within our business. And I think the point is, this is not a new challenge, slightly new lens being a global pandemic, but the idea of trying to take a thoughtful, people-centric approach to solving that equation is something that CBRE's workplace team has been doing over for over 10 years, over 200 unique projects a year, many of which involve that same type of question. How do we balance both in the built environment, but also in just our entire work experience? How do we strike that right balance to really have a differentiated employee value proposition and drive productivity? So that, I guess, I'll kind of parlay that into what the future could look like. Right now, I mean, in short, it's too early to tell. A couple things and a couple areas of focus that we think are going to be longer term implications of COVID versus kind of near term band-aids that we need to address in order to get through to a place where we have enough information and certainty to make longer term capital intensive decisions, right? The first one is exactly what we just talked about.
Just a little buffering there.
Most organizations and technology.
Jesse, I think you're buffering a little bit. Yeah. Just about to get the secrets of the world.
I know. I was right on the edge of my seat. I was ready for it.
You got to pay for the sequel. He might be coming in and out as he's fixing that. I'm gonna go to a different topic and let him come back to that. So Eric and Elaine, these poor young people that just graduated college and they're looking for their first job. What are the organizations that you're leading or that you talk to or other corporate leaders in the Austin Metro or wherever? What are they doing in terms of, if this is my job and it's just on a computer screen, other than compensation, does the experience become a commodity, and how is that affecting recruiting, and how do you keep young people engaged in what you're trying to accomplish, whether it's mission statement or vision or simple camaraderie? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. No, I can start. This is a real issue. This is a real important issue too. I'll say that one is, I think it can translate. I mean, we've had employees start. We're still doing an internship program this summer with college interns. We're having to be creative about it, but I think you do have to be mindful. And Elaine mentioned some sort of tactics, and we're trying to do some of the same things. You have to be mindful about, we're a company that's built on a strong culture. We have very high retention. And so mindfully managing those sort of social interactions, cultural interactions, it does take a different sort of mindset change. We have to be a little bit more deliberate about it. We have to be creative in the means that we're using. For the first few weeks, it was like virtual happy hours every night. And then we're all like drinking too much and having too many happy hours. We're trying to think of other stuff. So I've got a virtual cheese tasting with the team to celebrate their success tomorrow. Sure. But there's all kinds of stuff that we're doing, but you have to do it, and it's possible. Sure. So I think that is an important element, but we are pressing forward and trying to engage our employees like any other time, and build the deep relationship bonds that ultimately result in retention of people to a company, and so that's important.
Great, thank you.
Well, and we have interns. It was a big debate, like, what are the interns going to do if we're not all together? And I have to be honest, like, I feel like I know them better, actually, because they're on our group meetings, and I've introduced them, and I see their faces, and I can talk to them a little bit more, where, I think people were in and out all the time, always going into meetings. And so, and I'm be curious to see, they may learn more this time than they've ever learned, when they're here doing, some not silly work, but, some clippings and different things like that, that we need them to do a lot of different projects right now. And I think the same with staff. I'm trying to make a point to check in with people more and talk to them and think about every single person. And I think we're in a bit of a different, because we were hit, pretty hard. All of our clients were hit really hard. And so, we're on the build back, and it's one of those things where it's just like, they need us so much. We were talking earlier, the amount of attention, because what we're dealing with is so heavy and so dramatic. And so I think in a lot of ways, they are going to have a completely different experience, but I think the talent pool is wide open, so we're looking at, kind of how are we going to be able to bring back what our company is different, and like what we do changed, and social media is far more important than even PR, so we're kind of reconfiguring things and thinking about what is our new normal, and it isn't normal at all. And I don't know, and I think in some ways the new kids don't know what normal was, so they're coming in and they're like, this is it, this is the way it's going to be, so I think for us, it's just trying to, every day will be different, we'll see.
I'll share with you.
Sorry, Eric. I had one seat. I had, please, Eric, go for it.
This is one of the things we're all working out. Like, this is always a challenge. But I'll just share with you an example to add on of some of the creativity we've applied. So one of the things I had been doing prior to the pandemic was we have a cafe at the headquarters, and I just go in and drop in on employees and meet new people in the company, pretty decent sized company. And so one of the things you have to do in this time frame is figure out the silver lining to it's a challenging situation. How do you find silver lining? And so I realized that can translate in ways that are actually less restrained than the cafe at our headquarters. And so I still do those employee lunches, and people can join from all over the world, and we just have lunch together over a call like this. And I get to Elaine's point, what made me think of it is I actually get to know people in a way that's sort of more intimate than the before, and a broader set of people across other sites of our company. So there is a silver lining. Another one, just we're still figuring out, but we actually last week announced the largest acquisition we've ever done. So we're trying to integrate another company into NI in this same time frame, and they're headquartered in Tel Aviv. So it's also international, and we can't travel. So we're having to be super creative and figure that out, because that sort of cultural integration is really, really important when people are sort of joining a new company. So we're all learning new stuff. Man, I keep waiting for Jesse to get back on and we can hear what was
we're on the precipice. Jesse
in purgatory.
Jesse, and as you started the buffer, you started to talk about technology infusion, not only in terms of problem solving, but in terms of, as Elaine said, kind of the new norm. And based on you mentioned about CBRE doing these workplace projects globally, to the tune of about 200 specific projects. From the moment that the pandemic really became prominent from a workplace standpoint, can you tell us some of the technology trends, the human trends? What are some of the aggregated data points that you're finding as an organization and using it as best practices with companies of all different size ranges?
Yeah, sure. I think something important to note there too, that I'll just build on, and then I'll answer some questions about the technology, because that's pretty expansive as well. But the big thing that we're seeing anecdotally and within some of the initial measurement via surveys and whatnot that we're doing is a lot of managers, kind of pre-COVID, there's usually a gap between kind of what the population in aggregate desires in terms of flexibility, oftentimes wanting more, and what management or leadership is comfortable with. There's usually some type of disconnect. It can go both ways, but what's been surprising is how closely positively correlated those metrics now are in terms of perception of the future. And also the surprise that a lot of leaders of others were at their ability to pivot so quickly, and the resiliency of people to accomplish work in a more distributed, remote manner. So that, which kind of goes into what I was saying before, the barrier in many cases was not technology, it was culture. And the change associated with upskilling managers on how to manage distributed teams, and just getting over the hump of measuring productivity in different ways than we're used to. Change is hard, big and small. That's a big change. And now we've all been forced to kind of adapt to that. So when it comes to technologies, it's a great question, because that's also kind of another category of long-term impact. A lot of organizational people in this flexible way, but it's also kind of an extent for general prop tech when it comes to kind of smart buildings, occupancy. So the things outside of kind of day-to-day, how are we better connecting people? How are we storing files and making sure that we have kind of a digital capable or digital literate company. So that's going to be another area that really better supports people in their day-to-day, makes them more efficient, in a more fluid kind of work arrangement, but also gives us the information in terms of data on how we're behaving to make informed decisions moving forward. At the top of that list in terms of kind of priorities is health and wellness right now. We think that's going to be a long-term implication too. Health and wellness and just well-being, both physical and cognitive, has been on the scorecard for many years, meaning this is an important kind of measure of success for our decision-making. That's just jumped to the top of the list. And in many ways, it has been an expectation, but it's even more so now. So when we think about technology investments and we think about policy decision-making, they're all going to be kind of very, very closely tied to that idea of wellness.
Great, thank you. Next topic, and then I want to open it up to the audience, and thank you for being so quiet this whole time, about some of the questions that I see that are coming in. I want to talk about traveling for work and then working for travel. So often the way to do business development is by way of, whether it's the steak dinner, the wine tasting, the concert, the connectivity, the way that people kind of come together. Are there ideologies within your given organizations where are you bifurcating operations for contingency or redundancy? So, NI can't operate in Austin because of COVID, but we have a mimicked operation, kind of like a BCP, a business continuity practice, set up in Omaha, and that's of course hypothetical. And so it's a two-part question. It's how are you dealing with the traveling for work, and then is there an ideology or a methodology that's being created where what if we go through another 90-day period where we're unable to work in a given location, but maybe it's geographically isolated? Would you go to your office in Arizona or San Antonio if Austin couldn't operate, for instance? And I'll open that up to anyone, and feel free to.
I'm happy, since you mentioned me, I'm happy to start. But so two parts. So the business continuity one, we've had to do that some already. We do have some degrees of redundancy in some of our operations in call centers and factories and things like that. And we've had to do that. We have had locations that were completely shut down. California, Milan, we have a significant footprint in Milan. And so, yes, the answer is and then we've had, the company of our scale, not surprisingly, we've also had some cases. So you have to go through sort of quarantining protocols and everything else. And so that's we already had some of those plans. We really rapidly, as this thing was ramping up, sort of brushed those off and hardened them a bit, and those have been effective, and they've served us well. The travel one is interesting. We've been trying to figure out, well, what's travel look like on the other side of this? We were talking before we came on. I personally travel. I've never been in Austin in 24 years. I've never been in Austin for this long continuously, and so I travel a lot. We have lots of people who travel a lot. On one hand, I don't think we're going to lose the desire for human connection, physical connection, and the wine dinner. I don't think goes away completely. I do think at a company of our scale, we've learned that a lot more things can be done over this format than we thought. And so travel will be less, and we will use this kind of technology more often. And we're still figuring out exactly what that looks like and when we travel for what, in the coming years.
And I think for us, we have, one team has their first trip, small trip, car trip, but, next week. And I think we would leave the option up to them if they're not comfortable to go. I'm going to have one meeting. And so I think it's on a case by case. And for some of our projects that we had just started before all of this, we have to see what we're working on and how that's going to, there's some situations where you just have to have seen what it is. But I think it's definitely greatly reduced. And I think that we're going to take everything kind of on a case by case and comfort level, basis, depending on what that is. But, even people that are bopping around in town, trying to make sure that, we're only doing the things that are absolutely necessary, as we're watching this evolve. But I think there are some trips and I've talked to a couple friends that, we're starting to take a few work trips here and there. And I think, the key is giving people the option and letting them decide if they're comfortable doing it. Because I think some people are like, send me now, I'll go, I'll do whatever. It just depends on the team member.
And Jesse, are you seeing any large organizations contemplate, instead of the million square foot office in one location, the idea of in theory 10 offices in 10 locations? What's your take on that? Oh, okay, well,
I think he liked it.
the strong and silent type.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's delayed a little bit. So a couple of kind of drivers in that conversation, right? One is, how do we limit commute and create a more accessible office? What you kind of alluded to, the hub and spoke model. How do we create more offices closer to our employee populations, and limit the exposure, both from kind of a commuting and just an in-office experience. The other is, how do we consolidate small offices, because real estate's probably our second largest expenditure on the books. Right now, we want to drive efficiency, understanding that we're in flux and that uncertainty in the near future. Those will kind of ebb and flow. People are talking about it right now. We're encouraging clients long-term decisions. I will say that a lot of our kind of pre-COVID surveying and even post-COVID measurement, two of the primary reasons why people want to be in the office, or what draws them into the office in this order, are people and tools or equipment that they might need, or makes them more effective, or makes their day more enjoyable. So the moment you start kind of bifurcating groups or fracturing the larger organization, which has been really the trend of consolidation has existed for many years now, of bringing a group into one place under one roof, one organization. You've probably seen a lot of those taglines to stimulate culture, to better cross collaborate, to provide mentoring opportunities, to give people learning and development opportunities that they otherwise would not have exposure to if they were separated from the rest of the group. So I think we'll see how that plays out. But again, encouraging folks not to push the pendulum too far in one direction or over speculate, when again, there are a lot of variables in this equation. I think the only other thing on travel, on T&E and whatnot, I agree with both Eric and Elaine. I think the other thing that we're kind of hearing is this whole idea of what's essential. And it's not only from a business standpoint, because I 100% agree, and we're hearing it unanimously, that nothing replaces face-to-face. But the other concerns, or the other variables in the equation, are things like sustainability, are things like work-life balance, are things like the actual expense that we could be reinvesting or spending in a different way. So some of those ideas are actually bubbling to the surface as some of the drivers as well.
Yeah, hey, I'll throw in one other interesting thread that we've been talking about, which intersects kind of two issues that we're all thinking about right now, which is we got COVID, and then we have the issue of racial justice that's going on. And we've been talking about, hey, the ability to enable more remote work is also a mechanism that we can use to recruit a more diverse workforce, not always requiring people to come to certain locations to be part of our company. So there's an avenue there that can help be part of a solution to another challenge that we and many organizations face.
Well, thank you for that. I'm actually going to turn it over to some Q&A because I'm just reading and there's some great questions coming in, and in no particular order. I recently read, and this was pre-COVID, that stress is the 21st century epidemic. And so there is one question, are any of these organizations offering telebehavioral health to their employees to deal with these current mounting stresses? And so just wondering if there's any kind of ideas and what anyone is offering or what you've heard of or whatnot.
Yeah. We are for sure, and this is actually an ongoing concern. Actually, one thing that a couple of people mentioned is the experience of employees varies a lot. You know, there's people that really are embracing work from home, and it gives them flexibility and freedoms that they enjoy. There's other people that are lonely or depressed, or I mean, this has all kinds of effects on different people. We've expanded our employee assistance to address that. We've also hosted sessions. We did one just for World Meditation Day and kind of teaching meditation practices to our employees. That's one thing that's helped me get through a lot of this. And then there's just the extending grace to employees, knowing that people are going to be more tired, and that's because they're stressed, and they're stressed because their work has changed a lot, and they're stressed because of the events going on outside the walls of their home office too. So. We're trying to, and if there's other ideas, we're trying to do whatever we can, but that is an ongoing concern for us for sure.
And we're the same. It's definitely a concern for us. And I think our work every day, you wake up and it's like someone had a COVID outbreak or someone, it's really, really stressful. And some of this, I think we were all like, wait, no one's ever done this before. There's not an answer. Yeah. Like we don't know the answer. So we've had a work, counselor therapist that's been working with us for several years, who's been invaluable. And I think that kind of giving us the tools for that. And as we're saying it, I was like, I should tell people they should call him more. But we also have moments where it's been amazing to watch the staff support one another when they're like, I need a break. I need a minute. Can so-and-so is going to take over for me right now. Today was really heavy. And I think, one of the things that's happened is everyone has become much more open and honest about the struggles. Like we'll get on the calls and it's like, how's everyone doing today? And I think that really helps. And they do there's group yoga and different things. We probably could stand to have a little bit more structure in that regard, but it's been encouraging to see people kind of we have a whole Slack channel of like books to read or, things that would help get your music to listen to. And that's been really nice and comforting to see, it all kind of bubble up on its own in that way.
That's great.
Those are some of the practices to carry forward. I know that was a different question, but put all of those things and things that we should carry forward beyond this, right?
100%.
Absolutely. Jesse, I'm going to ask you a question that sprung up from our guests, and then certainly for Elaine and Eric as well. Close your eyes, and we come back into our spaces, and there's one or two substantive changes. What workplace design changes brought on by COVID do you think are going to be here for the long term?
I'm assuming that was directed toward me, but it's still a little bit delayed. So we talked about some of those long-term implications. We haven't talked a lot about the re-entry, but there's a lot of good material out on that. A couple of the design implications, it's a bit of a conundrum right now because the short term is really all about social distancing, and the long term might actually be heading toward the other way or at the other end of the spectrum, because we've identified in many cases opportunities for people to work outside the office at least some amount of time. So if we're going to implement a working arrangement where you have that type of flexibility, it's empowered and people are taking advantage of it, usually some level of sharing is associated with that type of strategy, meaning multiple people share different types of desks. Either you have a hoteling system and you rent the desk out on a daily basis, or you have a free address model and you have a neighborhood that you're assigned to instead of an individual desk. So a lot of times when that happens, you see a reallocation to more collaborative spaces and amenity spaces. And if we kind of agree to the notion that a larger portion of that individual work will happen at home, you might see offices prioritizing more of those social and collaborative spaces, because the reason for coming into the office might be slightly different than it used to be. That said, a lot of the organizations we work with, and I'm sure everyone on this call can relate, our days are extremely dynamic. It's very rare that we only collaborate or we only have heads down focus on any given day. So it's always important to understand that if we think that each of our offices is going to be the new convene where groups of people only rent out spaces to meet or have conferences on a daily basis, it's probably pushing it a little bit too far. But minor tweaks in just redefining the purpose of the office and kind of articulating that value proposition of why employees should come in and how it's going to make them more effective might shift away from where it's at today.
Great.
Yeah, I'll just endorse, because we've been having this discussion, and very similar to what you said, Jesse. We're sort of evaluating. Of course, we have a lot of lab spaces and things like that we need, and they'll persist. But largely, if we think of our typical office environment, we have desks where we do email or write documents, and meeting rooms where we get groups of people together, and more, a lot of the people are online anyway. Those are the two things that work the best from home, or at least in a different kind of space. And so we are thinking about, how will we use it? And it's very much in line with what you do. Oh, and that was the other thing I was going to say. And then today, when we want to go do some long-term planning, we do an offsite. We go rent a hotel space. And so it's that's probably what we want the office space to be for, not going offsite to do that. So anyway, similar lines of thinking there.
Another just real technical, to get a little bit granular too, another implication of working flexibly is the technology we've talked about, but it also, the tangible impact is we use a lot less paper. If we're going to be working outside of the office, it's not practical to be lugging a lot of paper back and forth. Most organizations, at least directionally, are working toward digitization and having a more cloud-based storage, so I can access files and I can work in different places, whether it be at home or traveling or whatnot. But that also, if you think about traditional cubes and whatnot, a lot of that, the surface area and the storage within the cubes, is really driven by the need for paper storage. So little things like that also have an implication on the size of different types of spaces. So if I have maybe smaller individual spaces, that's also an opportunity, just driven by the need for, or the lack of the need for paper storage now. It gives you opportunities to what we call reallocate that space into higher demand resources in the office that better support your people.
Well, fantastic. I want to get to a couple more questions. Sadly, a lot of sports camps and summer camps are closed for the summer, dealing with COVID still and those repercussions. Are any of your organizations dealing with the need for childcare? Especially in the last fiscal quarter where the schools were out, and how are your organizations dealing with that?
I mean, we have we have several people that have children. I mean, I'm sitting at my actual office to get away from my children because they're teenagers and they're very loud. But I think that, the childcare was an issue. I think now that's slowly starting to open back up. But I mean, I think it's just changing it's also changing when people work. What are their hours? How are they going to be doing things? I mean, a lot of people are I can just barely keep it together during the day. Once I go to bed, I can work. So I think it's just on our end is being flexible against what everybody's childcare, kind of needs are.
Yeah, it's the same for us. We're just, the main way we're dealing with it is just flexibility with those individuals being able to work different hours, work from home. We tried to look at, is there anything we can do in the childcare front? Unfortunately, it's even if with distancing, we can't do childcare that other places also can't do. So we couldn't come up with a good solve for that other than the flexibility to our employees at this point.
Sure. Jesse, I want to get to another question because I think it's very, very relevant for your practice. It has to do with shared office spaces. And we have about 4 minutes left of questions, and then we're going to turn it back over to Eugene. And this has been great and dynamic. Jesse, how do you see shared office spaces changing in terms of offerings and layouts? And then for Elaine and Eric to kind of piggyback off of that, in your particular office, when people do come back, will there be a requisite for your employees to be wearing masks and any particular protocols? And how would that affect a sales division or a call center division or something like that? And so 1 minute each, and I'm going to keep you strict to it.
And I'm assuming that the shared office is kind of alluding to co-working type environments. Yeah. So simply put, in the near term, the traditional co-working is not real sustainable, meaning the one-off subscription-based, lots of different entities with very little control, very highly dense quarters. That is less sustainable in the near term until we get to a vaccine or we get a level of comfort that actually creates higher safety. The thing that is actually likely on the rise is what we call enterprise solutions, where larger corporates or just larger organizations will lease out entire floors, but they'll have a co-working organization design, build, operate for them. Co-working right now in the near term is really providing the option that it has since its inception, is a more flexible option when it comes to a traditionally very long-term investment / decision that is real estate. Organizations need that right now, even if it's a premium.
And Elaine, Eric, masks, no masks? What are some rules? Give me two rules.
We're much smaller, so you don't have to have your mask on at your desk, but anytime you get up, you have to say, I'm getting up, I'm going, and again, we're much smaller, and you have to have your mask on the entire time you're walking around the office, and then you can take it off, which I've heard varying. Some people have masks on sitting down, but I just think that seems like a challenge. So masks anytime you're not sitting at your physical desk.
Yeah, we're saying about, so first of all, very limited capacity, so there's much fewer people. They're spaced out. Conference rooms are spaced out. Masks, when you're at your desk, you don't have to wear a mask. Masks everywhere else on campus. Temperature scanning when you come in. Limited movement between floors. All those protocols, and we've had those in place, and we'll continue to have those for the foreseeable future.
And then one last question: if a large number of employees no longer wish to work at the office, and would there ever be a consideration of additional compensation for helping to reduce those occupancy or operating expenses? Has that come up? If has there been any challenge or questions around that?
Also, for people working from home, because we don't have the cost of coming into the office, I don't know yet. I mean, we're talking about do we extend? We've done some near-term things on office allowance stuff, just small stuff. That's a consideration in the future. Do we do that? And then we just kind of see how it works out. To Jesse's point, I mean, I think a lot of people are going to want some hybrid working arrangements. And so, that has to factor into it. If you want to come into the office a few days a week, most of our roles, that's likely what's going to happen. We do have remote roles today, though, that have compensation through office allowances and things like that.
Sure. Last words, Elaine and Jesse?
It's all you, Elaine.
I mean, for us, I think it's like, I hadn't even thought about it, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think for us, it's going to be similar, where there are going to be people that come in, several, it's going to be the hybrid. So people, I don't know anyone that won't come in at all. We have a couple remote people, but they're happy to be remote.
Yeah. Lots to learn.
And we'll let Jesse go back to growing his awesome beard. So, well, guys, thank you so much for the time. We're going to turn it back over to Eugene, but I thought this was really phenomenal, worthwhile, and spoke to a lot of different topics. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
See, Tim, Jesse, Eric, Elaine, thank you so much for participating in Culturati Live. You know, a couple things that I heard. Eric talked about how it levels the playing field, and I remember watching Mark McLean on video the other day, and Mark talked about how he will never again have an executive board team meeting live, face to face, because he might have 5 people in the office, but 5 people, other people around the world. And now that everybody has been on a level playing field and contributing, that's a much stronger team. So I think that's a lesson for us. And then I think Jesse mentioned the dynamicism of who's an essential player, who's an essential worker. So those are important. You know, I think we're headed into workplace 2.0. It's just going to be different for the rest of our lives in a very positive way.
Yeah.
And then one thing that occurs to me, a little bit of a plug since I'm involved in Capital Factory, is I know some folks who have team members that have to get out of their home. They must go back to work. And since it's only 1, 2, or 3, my friends aren't ready to open back up the workplace. And so what I've suggested is Capital Factory will waive the normal strict criteria about who can be a member at Capital Factory today, so that we can help out employers whose team members just need a place to go. We're radically sticking to the no more than 25% occupancy. We have crazy disinfection and cleanliness criteria. We've got some people online, and we've got a lot of people that are working and helping virtually. But if employers are looking for those 1, 2, or 3 person solutions, instead of reopening their office, they might contact Capital Factory. Tim, thank you so very much. This was your idea, and I think it was a great conversation.
It really was. And, you know, I just, based on the dynamics of everything going on, a new conversation might exist in 30 days. It might be completely different. So we should look to revisit this after getting some feedback from our guests.
You know, I believe that we're going to, the numbers appear to be surging of new infections and hospitalizations all over the state, not just in Austin. I'd say the probabilities are that we're going to go back into another level of lockdown by the end of the month. No certainty there, but probability. It will be problematic because I'm not sure there's going to be complete compliance. This seems to be becoming a political issue instead of a safety issue. But yeah, I mean, I'm saying workplace 2.0 is the future, but there may be some interim stops before we get there.
That's right. Well, Eugene, thanks so much for allowing CBRE to partner with you. We look forward to more partnerships in the future, and thanks to everyone that participated.
Great. Thank you all for joining us today.
Bye-bye now.
Bye. Sophia, we're off.